I saw Prince step out of the ambulance alive. Not stumbling, not confused, alive. The world was told he died that morning, but I was there when he opened that door, looked straight at me, and walked away like nothing in the world could touch him. Minutes later, they zipped up another body and told me to keep my mouth shut. They said the truth would break things that shouldn't be broken. For years, I believed them. But what I saw that day never stopped following me. It started with a vibration, not a ringtone, one short pulse at 5:43 a.m. A text that said only 3 words: come. No sirens, no location code, no dispatch ID, just the coordinates. Whoever sent it bypassed the regular system completely. I should have reported it, but curiosity always wins before conscience wakes up. When I pulled up to the estate, fog sat on the driveway like a curtain. A guard waved me through without looking at my badge. Every window was covered from the inside. Curtains, blankets, even bed sheets, like they were hiding the sky itself. Inside, no one screamed. No one ran. There was only whispering and the soft scrape of someone dragging metal across the floor. I'd worked enough real emergencies to know what chaos smells like. This smelled rehearsed. They took my phone the moment I stepped in. Standard privacy, the man said. Except he wore no hospital ID. Something in my gut told me this wasn't about saving a life. It was about containing one. They led me down a hallway painted deep violet. Lights flickered overhead. Every clock I passed ticked a half-second slow, like time itself was lagging behind. He's in the recording room, a voice said, low and final. When I entered, the air changed. It was heavy, metallic, as if the oxygen had been filtered through an amplifier. And there, on the floor, was the shape everyone would soon mourn. The body lay perfectly still, half covered by a robe that caught the light and threw it back in bruised purples. Someone had arranged the scene. Wires coiled neatly, instruments lined against the wall, a coffee cup still steaming. This wasn't a sudden collapse. It was a stage left behind mid-performance. I knelt beside the body, heart thudding in my ears. Training kicked in. Airway, pulse, pupils. Everything read wrong. The skin temperature didn't match the timeline. The muscles were too relaxed, as if the body had been waiting for me. That's when I saw it. The small details no camera could catch. The right ear curved differently. The mole on the neck was gone. The hands, bigger, calloused. Whoever this was, it wasn't him. But when I opened my mouth to say it, a woman in a black blazer stepped forward and pressed a finger to her lips. "Write the name," she whispered. "What name?" "You know which one." I looked around. Every pair of eyes in that room avoided mine. Some were red from crying, others looked rehearsed for the camera. Someone handed me the clipboard. Prince Rogers Nelson. His name was already printed at the top. All I had to do was sign. My pen hovered. The page seemed to vibrate, like the paper itself was alive and daring me to tell the truth. "But this isn't," I started. "Write it," she repeated, voice sharpening. And that's when I noticed her hand trembling. Fear, not of me, but of whoever waited outside that door. I'd been in war zones, disaster zones, overdose houses. but nothing compared to that silence. It wasn't grief, it was agreement. A collective decision to rewrite reality. I wrote the name. The letters looked foreign, heavy. The sound of the pen scratching across the form was louder than my own breathing. When I looked up again, someone had already covered the face with a white sheet. Time of death, the woman said. 8:07 a.m. I answered automatically. But when I checked my watch, it read 7:59. That's when the hum began. Low, vibrating through the floorboards, like a bass note too deep for speakers. The lights dimmed. Every hair on my arm stood up. I turned to ask if anyone else felt it, but everyone else had stepped back, forming a perfect circle around the stretcher. And then the security chief leaned in close and whispered, "Remember your oath." I never took one. Not with them. They started moving, efficient, mechanical. The stretcher wheels squeaked as they pushed it toward the hallway. I followed because that's what you do. You follow protocol even when you know it's wrong. At the door, the chief turned to me. No lights, no sirens. Straight to the hospital. You understand? I nodded, though every instinct screamed to refuse. Outside, the fog had thickened. Cameras flashed behind the gates, vultures sensing tragedy before it even hatched. We loaded the covered body into the ambulance. The door slammed shut with a sound that felt too final. Inside, the silence pressed against my skull. The body lay inches from me, unmoving. But I couldn't shake the image of that missing mole, that wrong ear, those hands that didn't belong. I kept thinking, who did they put under that sheet? And more importantly, where was the real Prince? I stared at the monitor. Flat line, no pulse, everything red as it should. Yet the air felt electric, like the room still contained a heartbeat no machine could register. I told myself I'd speak up once we reached the hospital, that someone higher up would see the difference, that the truth would win simply because it was true. But truth is just another body waiting to be buried. The driver spoke for the first time. Keep your head down when we roll through the gate. No photos. Why? I asked. They said not to let anyone see his face. Why not? He didn't answer. That's when I noticed the mirror above the stretcher, angled so I could see my reflection. Except it wasn't just mine. For half a second, I swore. Another pair of eyes stared back from under the sheet. I blinked. They were gone. My throat went dry. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, I felt something watching me. Something still awake. The world outside would soon believe their icon was gone forever. Inside that ambulance, I wasn't so sure, because the body lying next to me looked like a mannequin dressed for a funeral. And deep down, I already knew this wasn't the man whose voice could shake heaven. But at that point, I couldn't prove anything. Not yet. All I knew was that the story I'd just signed my name to was a lie big enough to swallow the world. But the moment I touched that body, the nightmare truly began. Because a few miles down the road, the dead man knocked from the inside of the ambulance. The wheels never stopped turning. The fog outside swallowed the siren lights before they could even flash, and the only sound inside the ambulance was that faint, mechanical breathing from the monitor. Steady, impossible, false. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined the movement earlier, that nerves were tricking me. But the silence had weight. Every few seconds, I thought I heard fabric shift under the sheet. Just once, I saw the outline of a hand push faintly upward, then fall back down. Reflex, I told myself. Reflexes happen. The brain can twitch after death. But what I didn't know was that this was no reflex. The hospital bay came into view, lit like a theater stage. No news crews, no random staff. Just a cluster of men in dark uniforms that didn't belong to any medical department I'd ever seen. They moved as one unit, opening the doors before we even stopped. One reached for the stretcher. The driver didn't say a word. When I climbed out, the air hit me differently. Colder, chemical, like bleach and copper mixed together. I realized this wasn't the main ER entrance. It was the loading dock used for private transfers, where paperwork disappears and cameras look the other way. They rolled the stretcher into a white-walled corridor that smelled like dust and ozone. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the kind of hum that eats into your brain. The man in front carried a clipboard thicker than a Bible. He never introduced himself, but I saw the initials DOJ stamped faintly on his ID badge. I tried to follow, but a nurse blocked me. "You're done," she said. Her tone wasn't rude, it was terrified. "No," I said. "I need to sign the handoff. There's protocol." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Protocol doesn't exist tonight." She turned away before I could ask what she meant. Still, curiosity pulled harder than fear. I slipped down a side corridor and watched through the glass window of the examination room. They were peeling back the sheet. What I saw made my stomach twist. The jawline was wrong, too square. The teeth, larger, uneven. The skin tone off by a shade that makeup couldn't explain. And the hands. The hands were workers' hands, scarred and calloused. Veins raised like ropes. This wasn't the man whose fingers danced on strings. This was someone who'd spent a lifetime gripping wrenches, not guitars. They began attaching sensors, but the machines kept failing to read. One tech muttered, "No data input," another said, "Check the sequence code." Sequence code? That's not a medical term. Then the lead agent, gray-haired, calm, too calm, spoke quietly. "Just stabilize the record. It doesn't matter if it matches. Stabilize the record. Not stabilize the body." Every hair on my arm stood up. I couldn't look away. One of the techs leaned over, pressed a marker against the man's neck, and drew a faint birthmark in the exact place Prince's should have been. When he finished, he nodded to the others. Perfect. I nearly pushed through the door right then, but the nurse who'd stopped me before appeared behind me again. "You don't want to be here," she whispered. "They're rewriting the body." Rewriting the body? My throat went dry. "Who are they?" I asked. She didn't answer. Her eyes glistened with tears. "Promise me something," she said. "When they tell you to sign, you sign. And you forget this face." She left before I could reply. Inside the room, the group worked like choreographers. No panic, no hesitation. Every movement rehearsed. They inserted tubes, adjusted the lighting, took staged photographs. Angles flattering enough for a memorial broadcast. Someone even combed the hair a certain way. They weren't documenting death, they were building it. The hum from the lights got louder until it felt like a pulse. My vision blurred for a second, and I swear the body's eyes fluttered open. Just once, a faint reflection of violet light passed across them, like stage lights through smoke. Then nothing. I stumbled back, heart pounding. I needed proof. Anything. I spotted an open cabinet with medical tags stacked inside. I slipped one into my pocket. The label read, Subject B, hold for verification. There was no Subject A. My hand was shaking so hard I almost dropped it. That's when I felt a hand grab my shoulder. It was the gray-haired agent. "You weren't invited in here," he said. "I need to verify identity," I stammered. "The fingerprint reader failed." He smiled. Not the kind of smile you return. "Identity is what we tell the world it is." He turned me around and guided me to the hall. His grip wasn't violent, but it was final. Before the door closed behind me, I heard someone say inside, "Get the decoy ready for transport." Decoy? The word echoed through my skull. I walked outside, gasping for air, and leaned against the cold brick wall. The night was unnaturally quiet, except for a faint rhythm in the distance, like a heartbeat syncing with the streetlights. My pager buzzed. A new message. Report complete. Await confirmation. Destroy notes. I hadn't written any notes. Not yet. But someone thought I had. That's when the nurse rushed out the side exit, face pale. "They're erasing everything," she said. "Files, scans, names. They said the real one left hours ago." "The real what?" I asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "The real him." Before I could say another word, a van screeched around the corner. Black windows, no plates. 2 men jumped out, grabbed her by the arms, and pulled her inside. The door slammed, and the van was gone. I stood there frozen, pulse hammering, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. My brain couldn't keep up with the fear. Every rational thought collapsed under the weight of what that nurse had said. The real one left hours ago. The world was about to mourn a man who was still breathing. For a long time, I stayed against that wall, breathing shallow, afraid to move. Eventually, I forced myself back toward the loading dock. The corridor was dark now, lights turned off. The room where they'd prepared the body was sealed. A new label hung on the door. Hazard, no entry. I could still hear the faint hum behind it. Rhythmic, mechanical, almost musical. And that's when I understood. The body wasn't lying still. It was lying for someone. Everything about this death was a production. Every second of it rehearsed. And I was the unwilling audience to the greatest performance of silence I'd ever seen. But the truth didn't stay buried for long. Because halfway through the next ride, the dead man moved. The night drive was supposed to be simple. A second transfer. Different route, different crew. They said it was just protocol. But after what I'd seen inside that hospital, I knew protocol was just another word for control. They didn't let me bring my own team this time. Just me, the driver, and the covered body in the back. No witnesses, no paperwork. Just an address that led to another facility in the middle of nowhere. The road cut through acres of mist and bare trees. No lights, no signs, just silence and asphalt stretching forever. Every bump made the gurney squeak like it was breathing. For a while, I tried to focus on the hum of the engine. Anything to keep from looking at that shape under the sheet. I kept thinking about how wrong the hospital felt, how the machines there didn't read, how the body seemed too staged to decay. Then the radio crackled, but no one had touched it. The driver glanced at me. "You hear that?" Static filled the cabin, soft at first, then rhythmic. It wasn't random. It was music. Slow, pulsing, familiar, like the beginning of a song I'd heard 1,000 times but couldn't name. Then a voice broke through, distorted but clear enough to freeze my blood. "Stop the vehicle." I turned to the driver. "Who was that?" He didn't answer, just kept driving, knuckles white on the wheel. "Stop the vehicle," the voice said again, louder. This time, it wasn't through the radio. It came from outside. I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. The fog ahead had thickened into a solid wall. The driver slowed down, hesitant, and that's when I saw it. Something moving inside the mist. A silhouette. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, some reflection on the glass. But then it stepped forward. A man, barefoot, drenched, wearing a purple robe that shimmered in the headlights. The same robe I'd seen earlier that day. He was standing in the middle of the road, head tilted, watching us approach. "Don't stop," I whispered. "Keep going." The driver's hands shook. "We'll hit him." "Keep going." The man didn't move. The driver slammed the brakes at the last second. The ambulance skidded sideways, tires screaming. When we stopped, the figure was gone. I jumped out before the driver could say a word. The air outside was freezing, wet, heavy. The fog swallowed everything within a few feet. "Hello?" My voice barely carried. "Is someone out there?" Silence. Then a faint hum, like someone tuning a guitar string far away. I took another step forward. My boot splashed into something dark. I looked down. The ground shimmered faintly purple like oil slicks reflecting light. The hum grew louder, wrapping around me, almost melodic. Then came a whisper, low and calm, right behind me. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around. Nothing. The ambulance door slammed shut. "Hey!" I shouted. "Open up!" No answer. The windows were fogged from the inside now. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I ran to the back and yanked the latch. The door opened on the second pull, and what I saw made my legs lock. The body was sitting upright, still covered by the sheet, but upright. The fabric shifted as it breathed in and out. Slow, steady, impossible. My throat tightened. Jesus. The driver was frozen in his seat, eyes wide, hands gripping the wheel so hard I thought he'd snap it. "Don't move," I whispered. He didn't even blink. The shape under the sheet tilted its head toward me, slowly, deliberately. The outline of a face pressed against the fabric, the features too clear to be coincidence. Then it spoke, muffled, quiet. "You saw me." The words weren't loud, but they hit me like a gunshot. I don't understand," I said, stepping back. "You saw me," it repeated, louder this time. The driver's foot slammed on the gas. The ambulance lurched forward, throwing me against the wall. The stretcher rolled, the sheet sliding halfway off, just enough for me to see the face beneath. Not dead, not even unconscious. Eyes open, staring straight at me. But those eyes weren't human. They glowed faintly, almost imperceptibly, a soft violet shimmer in the dark. I shouted for the driver to stop, but the radio exploded in static again, drowning my voice. A distorted melody crackled through the speakers, familiar, haunting. Then, between the distortion, the same whisper came again. You saw me. You signed for me. My blood went cold. The ambulance jerked violently, tires screeching against gravel. We'd veered off the road and come to a halt near an empty field. When I stumbled out, gasping for air, the fog was gone. Clear moonlight, open land. And standing a few yards away, there he was. Prince, alive, no sheet, no stretcher, just him barefoot in the field, eyes glowing faintly under the moonlight. He looked cleaner, lighter, almost translucent around the edges, like his body was fading in and out of reality. He didn't speak, didn't need to. I felt something inside my head, his voice without sound. They buried the wrong one. Then, as quickly as he appeared, he started walking backward into the darkness, dissolving into the air until only his voice remained. Don't follow. The hum from before built into a high pitch that rattled my teeth. I fell to my knees, clutching my ears. The driver stumbled out, shouting my name. But when I looked up, he was gone too. Just gone. The ambulance engine sputtered and died. Silence fell over everything. Not natural silence, manufactured silence, the kind that feels enforced. I got back inside and closed the door. The interior smelled like static and iron. The sheet lay crumpled on the floor. No body, no blood, no sign of anyone ever being there. And yet, when I glanced at the monitor, a pulse line appeared. One single spike across the screen. Beep. Then nothing. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the empty stretcher. The fog began to creep back, curling around the edges of the windows as if sealing me in. I realized I wasn't transporting a body anymore. I was transporting a secret, and it was alive. But what scared me most wasn't what I saw that night. It was who came for me the next morning. Morning came too fast. I didn't sleep, not really. Just sat at my kitchen table listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the static in my own head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that field, that glow, that face dissolving into the dark. At 6 a.m., sharp, someone knocked. Not a polite knock. 3 slow, deliberate hits that made the door tremble. I froze. Nobody knew I was home. Nobody should have known. When I opened it, 2 men stood on my porch. Black suits, black ties, smiles that looked printed on. One of them held a leather folder. The other carried nothing, not even a phone. "May we come in?" the first man asked. It wasn't a question. They didn't wait for permission. They walked past me like they'd been here before, like this was their house and I was just borrowing it. The taller one sat at my table, opened the folder, and slid a document across the wood. It was my incident report, the one I hadn't filed yet. My handwriting, my signature, my timestamp. Except I never wrote it. "We're here to help you correct a few inconsistencies," the man said. His voice was smooth, steady, too confident for someone pretending to help. I stared at the page. It described an unidentified male. Time of death 8:07 a.m., confirmed by me, transferred without issue. Word for word, it matched the report the hospital should have filed, but I never saw that version. "I didn't write this," I said quietly. He smiled wider. "Then you don't have anything to worry about." The other man placed a black recorder on the table and pressed play. My voice filled the room. Patient confirmed deceased. Time of death 8:07. It was me? My tone, my words, my breathing. But I'd never said them into any recorder. I felt the floor tilt under me. "Where did you get that?" He ignored the question. "The narrative is finalized. All we need is your acknowledgement, a signature confirming accuracy." The folder came back toward me. A new page waited on top. A non-disclosure agreement, dense paragraphs of legal knots. The final line read, "By signing below, you affirm that the body recovered on date belonged to Prince Rogers Nelson." My pen hand shook. "You can't make me sign this." He leaned forward, eyes flat. "We can make you wish you had." That was the first time I truly felt fear. Not of ghosts or corpses or secrets, but of them. The shorter man pulled out his phone and turned it toward me. On the screen was a live feed of my sister leaving for work, coffee in hand, oblivious. He swiped again. My apartment building's hallway, shot from a hidden camera. "You're important to us," he said softly. "We just need your cooperation." I looked back at the paper. The edges were damp with sweat from my hands. The ink on my name line was already smudged, as if it had been signed before and wiped clean. The taller one pushed a fountain pen toward me. The barrel was red. "Ink's fresh," he said. When I picked it up, I realized it wasn't red. It was brown, dark, dried. Blood. My stomach turned. "You're wasting time," the man said. "The longer you wait, the more complicated this becomes." For a moment, I considered refusing, running, telling someone, but who would believe me? I'd seen things that shouldn't exist. A dead man breathing, a ghost giving orders. My world was already broken. They were just writing the obituary. I signed. The pen dragged thick across the page, the letters uneven. The ink spread like veins. When I lifted it, the man smiled, satisfied. "Good," he said. "Now you can rest easy. We'll take it from here." He gathered the papers, tapped them into a neat stack, and slipped them into the folder. The other man pocketed the recorder. Before leaving, the tall one looked at me and said, "Prince died for your silence. Don't waste it." Then they were gone. The door clicked shut, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. My signature still gleamed wet on the page of my memory. I went to the sink and washed my hands until the water ran pink. The smell of the ink wouldn't leave. For hours, I sat staring at the window. I half expected the fog to appear again, the figure to reemerge from it. But what came instead was worse. An envelope slid under my door. No stamp, no address, just my name written in silver ink. Inside was a single Polaroid. The photograph showed me sitting at the same table, pen in hand, signing the NDA. In the background, reflected in the window, stood a shadow, tall, robed, watching. I dropped it, heart pounding. When I looked again, the photo was blank. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A voice spoke before I could say hello. "You're free to return to work tomorrow," it said. "We appreciate your professionalism." Click. That was it. No threat, no demand. But every word carried weight, like a promise made with a blade. That night, I went back to the station. My locker had been cleaned out. My ID badge reissued with a new photo. The expression slightly off, the eyes too flat. My colleagues avoided me. A few smiled too politely, as if they'd been told something I hadn't. When I looked up at the bulletin board, a memo caught my eye. Confidential. All documentation regarding April 21st transfer is restricted. Report discrepancies to oversight immediately. Oversight. That wasn't a department I'd ever heard of. At the bottom of the page was a phone number. I memorized it before security escorted me out for clocking in off shift. Walking home, the city felt staged. Lights too bright, pedestrians too quiet, air too clean. Like someone had replaced the world while I wasn't looking. In my pocket, the Polaroid pulsed with warmth, faintly vibrating like a heartbeat. And that's when I noticed the back of the photo had new writing on it. 4 words, in silver ink again. "He isn't finished yet." I froze in the middle of the street. Cars passing, horns blaring, but all I could hear was my own pulse sinking to that faint hum I thought I'd left behind. But when the news aired that night, the world saw what I couldn't unsee. Proof that he was still out there. I told myself I was done. I told myself I'd forget it. That a signature could erase guilt if you stared at it long enough. But the truth doesn't go away. It waits. And sometimes it comes back on live television. 3 days after I signed the papers, the entire world stopped. Every channel, every feed, every timeline was plastered with one headline: Prince found dead in his home. I remember standing in my living room, remote in hand, staring at the screen like a hostage watching his own ransom note. The anchors spoke softly, reverently. "The legend has passed." Their voices trembled, perfectly rehearsed, just enough grief to sound human. Candlelight vigils appeared across the world within hours. Purple lights flooded city skylines. And all I could think was, "You were mourning the wrong man." I tried to change the channel, but every station carried the same story, the same footage, looping endlessly. Then I saw it, the part that shouldn't have existed. The camera cut to the hospital bay. Grainy security footage. The ambulance doors open. A stretcher is pulled out, covered in white. The timestamp at the bottom of the screen read 8:13 a.m. My heart stopped. The official time of death, what they made me write, was 8:07. 6 minutes difference. 6 minutes of silence no one could explain. The reporter's voice droned on. Authorities confirm he was unresponsive on arrival, but I barely heard her. I was focused on a single shadow near the left edge of the frame, the shape of a man, still half obscured by the door of the ambulance. The screen flickered. For one frame, maybe less than a second, the shadow moved. It stepped out of view. I rewound, played it again. Same thing. The movement wasn't random. It was deliberate, like someone stepping out of the shot. I turned up the volume. You could hear the faint click of boots on pavement, the sound of the stretcher wheels squeaking. But under it, buried in static, there was something else. A soft hum. A single musical note. I knew that sound. It was the same note that played from the tapes. The same frequency that had haunted my head since that night. I froze the frame again and zoomed in. The shadow was clearer now, a silhouette facing the camera. He wasn't standing like a medic or an officer. He was standing like a performer, one arm slightly raised, as if caught mid-introduction. The hairs on my neck rose. I stepped back from the TV, breath shallow. The lights in my apartment flickered once, twice, then stabilized. The broadcast continued, but I wasn't listening. All I could think was, they didn't just fake his death, they filmed it. The realization hit like ice. The footage wasn't leaked, it was released. Every second of it had been framed, edited, chosen. Someone wanted the world to see this. That night, I tried to sleep, but my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Private number, no message, just a file, a video. I opened it. It was the same hospital footage, but longer. The 6 minutes that had been cut out of the news broadcast. In this version, the camera didn't stop rolling after the stretcher was pulled out. The lens stayed fixed on the ambulance door. At 8:09, the sheet over the stretcher twitched. Not much, just a small flutter near the feet. The medics didn't react. At 8:10, the light inside the ambulance dimmed, and a shadow appeared. Someone sitting upright in the back. At 8:11, the driver climbed out, looked straight into the camera, and shut the doors. And at 8:13, a figure stepped out the side, into the frame exactly as I remembered. He turned toward the camera, eyes reflecting the headlights. Prince, no mistaking it. His mouth moved. Just 2 words, not yet. Then the screen went black. I sat there shaking, replaying it over and over. The file vanished minutes later. Auto-deleted. A message followed. Do not pursue. I laughed out loud. A broken, hysterical sound that barely felt like mine. Do not pursue. It was too late for that. The moment I'd seen that shadow move, I was already down the rabbit hole. I started noticing other things. The interviews, the press statements. They all repeated the same lines, word for word. He was a private man. He died peacefully. Even the tone of voice matched across networks like a shared script had been issued. The conspiracy wasn't online. It was televised, scripted for mass consumption. But then came the part that broke me completely. The network aired an aerial shot of the hospital grounds, a view from a news chopper that had arrived too early, before the authorities locked the area. In the far right corner of the screen, near the parking lot, stood a single figure, watching the chaos. He was wearing the same purple robe. I leaned closer, heart hammering. For a brief second, as the helicopter passed overhead, the figure looked up, straight at the camera, straight at me. That same calm stare I'd seen before. The one that said, "You saw what they didn't." Then the feed cut to commercial. I remember dropping to my knees right there in my living room. My skin burned. My heartbeat synced with that faint hum that had followed me for days. He was alive. Somewhere. Somehow. And someone was making sure the world would never believe it. When I looked out my window, I realized I wasn't alone. Across the street, under a flickering streetlight, stood two silhouettes in black coats. Same suits as before. Watching. I closed the blinds and sat in darkness, listening to my own breathing. The television turned back on by itself. Static at first, then a slow dissolve into color. A symbol appeared on screen, a white dove on a purple background. Beneath it, words in silver text, "The truth will sing." The screen faded to black again, and I heard the faintest sound of a tape reel spinning. But the tapes didn't stop there, because the next one wasn't a broadcast. It was sent directly to me. The first envelope arrived the next morning. No postmark, no stamp. Just my name written in looping silver ink. I didn't touch it at first. I just stared at it, sitting on my kitchen counter like it was breathing. By noon, there were two more. One on my doorstep, one wedged under my car's wiper blade. Each one weighed almost nothing. Inside the first was a single cassette tape. No label, no handwriting, just that dull gray plastic and a faint chemical smell that made my eyes sting. I found an old player in my closet and pressed play. Static, then silence, then faintly a rhythm, steady and slow, like someone breathing into a microphone. A whisper followed, a man's voice, low, hoarse. "You signed the wrong name." I froze. The voice wasn't distorted enough to hide its tone. It was soft, familiar. It was him. I yanked the tape out and threw it across the room, but the sound didn't stop. It kept playing, even with the cassette lying shattered on the floor. That same whisper looping. "You signed the wrong name." I unplugged the player, and the room went dead silent. For hours, I didn't move. When I finally looked outside, a car idled across the street. Black tinted windows, engine running. I couldn't see the driver, but I could feel eyes on me. Watching, waiting. By the next day, another envelope arrived. This one heavier. Inside was a folded sheet of glossy paper, like a photo printed on thin metal. It was an image of a recording studio, empty, cables trailing across the floor. But in the reflection of the glass booth, there was a figure. A man, barefoot, wearing that same purple robe. He was facing the camera, and he was smiling. At the bottom of the print, in silver ink, a single phrase, "Track 2." That night, I started hearing the hum again, the same frequency that filled the air inside that ambulance. It came from the walls, the vents, the light fixtures, an endless low vibration that made my teeth ache. Sleep became impossible. I sat up all night, waiting for the next sound. It came at 3:17 a.m., a soft click from my hallway. I opened the door and found another envelope on the floor. This one wasn't sealed. Inside was a second tape. When I played it, the static hit harder. Then came the voice, closer this time, clearer. "You didn't bury me. You buried him." Then, beneath the words, faint music began. A melody I didn't recognize, half song, half heartbeat, the chords bent and warped. repeating like a loop of memory that refused to end. I could hear breathing behind it. Not from the recording, from my apartment, from the next room. I turned, expecting nothing. But the door to my living room was open, and there, reflected in the window, was a shape standing behind me. I spun around. Nothing. When I looked back at the player, the tape had stopped. The reels were still, but the voice whispered one last line before the machine powered off by itself. "You're next on the track." I didn't sleep for 2 days after that. Every time I blinked, I saw flashes of him, sometimes in reflection, sometimes in the flicker of passing cars. I couldn't tell if I was losing my mind or if the world had started replaying itself. By the 4th envelope, I didn't even hesitate. I opened it right there on the floor. No tape this time. Just a piece of sheet music, handwritten, old, creased at the edges. The title at the top read, "The Wrong Body." Half the notes were crossed out, rewritten in ink that shimmered faintly under the light. At the bottom of the page, one more message. "Play it where it began." That's when I realized what the voices had been trying to tell me. The location, the heartbeat, the studio. They wanted me to go back to where it all started. But the last tape didn't have music. It had instructions and a destination I should have never followed. I told myself I wouldn't go back. But when you hear a voice calling you from the grave, curiosity isn't curiosity anymore. It's gravity. The address on the last note led to the outskirts of Minneapolis, to a place the GPS refused to recognize. The road ended before the map did. What stood ahead wasn't a studio anymore. It was a mausoleum made of soundproof glass and rotting velvet. I pushed the door open, and it moaned like an old instrument. The air inside was thick with dust and something sweeter. Perfume, faint but familiar, clinging to every wall like memory. Cables coiled across the floor like veins. The lights flickered once and stayed dim. My footsteps echoed, but not in sync. It was like the room was answering back, half a beat behind. In the center sat a single recording chair and a table covered in reels, stacked neatly like offerings. On top, a cassette player, different from the others. Sleek, new, waiting. My hands trembled as I pressed play. No static this time, no music, just breathing. Then a voice, clear as daylight. "You came." I turned toward the sound, but the room was empty. The voice wasn't coming from the tape. It was in the air, vibrating through the walls, through me. "You saw it," it said. "You signed it. Now you have to understand it." The lights flickered brighter. Across the room, a curtain lifted on its own, revealing a second chamber, a small sound booth sealed behind glass. And inside it was another body, laid out perfectly, preserved, dressed in the same purple robe. For a moment, I couldn't move. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. Every feature, every line, every scar that the other body didn't have. This was him, the real one. I stumbled closer, pressing my palm against the glass. Cold, solid, real. The hum returned, low, harmonic. Like the first note of a song warming up, the body's chest rose once, just once. I stumbled back. "No," I whispered. "No, this isn't..." But the tape answered. He didn't die. He was recorded. The lights dimmed again. The hum deepened into a pulse. Every surface in that room began to vibrate, the glass walls rippling like water. The voice continued, calm, matter of fact. They couldn't let him go. He was too valuable, too powerful. So they made a copy, a living replica to bury. And when it was done, they stored the real one in sound. Every note, every frequency, his life pressed into magnetic tape. I felt my knees give way. That's impossible. You heard him, the voice replied. You heard what they made. The hum grew louder. The walls shook. The tapes began to spin by themselves, one after another, thousands of them. The air filled with a storm of overlapping sounds, breaths, words, melodies. Not random, not noise. A heartbeat of a man preserved in music. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the sound wasn't just in the room. It was inside me. Every cell of my body pulsed with it. I felt him there, everywhere. The voice came again, closer now, whispering right behind me. He's not gone. He's just playing on repeat. I turned, and for a fraction of a second, he was standing there. Not a ghost, not a vision, alive. He looked younger, untouched. His eyes shimmered violet, not glowing this time, living. He smiled, faintly. They made you keep the silence so I could stay in it. Then, just like that, the room went dark. The hum stopped. The smell of dust turned metallic, sharp, electric. When the lights flickered back on, the booth was empty. The tapes had all stopped spinning, but one was missing, the one that had been in the player. In its place sat a new cassette, labeled by hand, silver ink. It read, Track 3, You. I picked it up with shaking hands, but I didn't play it. I didn't have to. Somewhere deep inside, I already knew what it contained. A copy of me. The silence I'd sworn to keep wasn't a choice. It was part of the recording. That's when I finally understood what they made me swear silence for. It wasn't about protecting him. It was about replacing me. Final payoff. I left the studio before sunrise, but the world outside didn't feel real anymore. Every sound I heard, the wind, the traffic, my own heartbeat, played in the same rhythm as that hum. It followed me, echoing through every wall, every silence. When I looked at my reflection in the car window, it blinked a half-second late. That's when I understood. The real Prince didn't die. They buried a double, then used me to seal the truth inside their masterpiece. They recorded him into existence and recorded me out of it. I wasn't a witness. I was part of the edit. Now, when I speak, my voice sometimes lags, like an echo catching up to itself. And late at night, when the static hums through the speakers, I can still hear him whispering from the other side, "Don't stop the music.